Hello, everyone. In the history of humankind, there are generals shaped by elite military academies, trained in theories, tactics, and grand strategy. And then, there are those forged in the fire of real battles, where every decision means life or death, and where conviction, experience, and love for their people become the greatest school of all. General Võ Nguyên Giáp belonged to the latter. He never attended a military school, yet he wrote some of the most brilliant chapters in the history of modern warfare. Once a history teacher, he became the commander-in-chief of the Vietnam People's Army, the man who led a small nation to defeat two of the most powerful military empires of the 20th century, France and the United States. He has been called many names: the brilliant student of Ho Chi Minh, the Red Napoleon, the master of People's War. But above all, he represents the intellect, resilience, and indomitable spirit of the Vietnamese people. For more than 3 decades, Giáp was not only a general, he was a symbol of independence and human will. He proved that victory does not always come from superior weapons, but from strategic vision and moral courage. Today, historians rank him among the greatest military minds of the 20th century, alongside Napoleon Bonaparte, Erwin Rommel, and Douglas MacArthur. In 1968, Time magazine featured him on its cover with the headline, "The Man Who Defeated the West Twice." British military historian Peter MacDonald wrote in Giáp, the victor in Vietnam, "He was one of the very few commanders in history capable of transforming a small guerrilla force into an army that could defeat 2 military superpowers." To the French, he was Le Général des Généraux, the general of generals. To the Americans, the legendary general. To the Vietnamese, simply Dai Tuong, the general. 2 words that carry both reverence and pride. When he passed away on October 4, 2013, the world mourned. From Paris to Washington, tributes poured in. The French foreign minister called him a great patriot, a great soldier of the Vietnamese people. American media remembered him as the man who changed the way the world understands war. Võ Nguyên Giáp left behind not just victories, but a philosophy of people's war, a belief that true strength lies not in firepower, but in the people's faith in justice. He once said simply, "We fought not to destroy, but to live freely." The story of General Võ Nguyên Giáp is not merely a story of Vietnam. It is the story of how intelligence, conviction, and courage can reshape the destiny of nation. Before he became the first commander-in-chief of the Vietnam People's Army, Võ Nguyên Giáp was a teacher, journalist, and young patriot. He was born in 1911 in a small village by the Kien Giang River in Quang Binh Province, a land of resilience, wind, and struggle in central Vietnam. As a child, Giáp witnessed the harsh realities of colonial rule. His people toiled under foreign domination, and freedom was but a distant dream. From those early years, a conviction took root in him. If a nation wants independence, it must fight for it. He attended Quoc Hoc High School in Hue, the cradle of many revolutionary figures. There, he absorbed not just knowledge, but also the spirit of defiance and self-determination. After graduation, he studied law in Hanoi and became a history teacher. In the classroom, Giáp taught more than history. He taught the meaning of freedom. He spoke of nations that had once been oppressed and later reclaimed their independence, from revolutionary France to the United States. No one could have imagined that this humble teacher would one day write one of Vietnam's most glorious chapters. In the 1930s, as the revolutionary movement grew, Giap joined the Indochinese Communist Party. He was arrested, imprisoned, and later escaped. The years he spent hiding in the mountains, living among ordinary villagers, shaped his philosophy of people's war, a vision where every citizen could become a soldier, and the will of the people would become the ultimate weapon. In the early 1940s, Vietnam lived under the shadow of war and oppression. Everywhere, people starved, labored, and suffered under foreign rule. Amid that darkness, a young man in his 30s, Võ Nguyên Giáp, left his classroom behind and chose the path of revolution. He once said, "I left the classroom because my country needed action more than lectures." At first, Giap worked in secrecy, organizing propaganda, writing, and building revolutionary networks. He had no army, no weapons, only faith in his people. For him, the true strength of Vietnam did not lie in firepower, but in its people's will for independence. In 1944, under the guidance of President Ho Chi Minh, Giap formed the Vietnam Propaganda Liberation Army, the predecessor of what would later become the People's Army of Vietnam. It began with only 34 soldiers, armed with old rifles and hunting guns, but fueled by an unbreakable dream of freedom. At the founding ceremony, Giap told his soldiers in a calm, resolute voice, "We may lack weapons, but we must never lack faith. Victory is born not from the gun, but from the person who holds it." Their first small battles, at Phai Cat and Nan Gan, were modest in scale but monumental in meaning. For the first time, the Vietnamese people believed they could win. In the freezing nights of the Viet Bac forest, Giap would sit beside his men, discussing tactics and the future of their nation. He did not see himself as a general, but as a companion to the first soldiers of a free Vietnam. It was during this time that a leader was quietly being shaped. From a history teacher, Giap was learning the hardest lesson of all, how to turn love for one's country into an organized force. He had no rank, no barracks, no maps, but in the hearts of millions a new belief was being born. The belief that if one man dared to stand up, an entire nation would rise with him. After the August Revolution, Vietnam entered its harshest years in the struggle against French colonialism. From the remote mountains of Viet Bac, General Võ Nguyên Giáp began commanding the first campaigns of a war whose outcome no one could yet foresee. Each campaign was a step forward, a lesson, a transformation, and a glimpse into the making of a master strategist. In late 1947, the French launched a massive assault on Viet Bac, aiming to destroy the revolutionary leadership. Confident in their strength, they believed one decisive strike would end the resistance. Giap chose the opposite path, to divide, to move, to strike from the shadows. Ambushes in deep forests, silent marches through the night, and local militias striking swiftly. These became the rhythm of a new kind of war. When the campaign ended, over 6,000 French troops were killed or captured. But the greater victory was psychological. Vietnam could fight and could win. 3 years later, Giap launched the border campaign, a turning point that shifted the war into full-scale offensive. The goal? To break isolation by opening the Vietnam-China border and secure international support. While many advised attacking Cao Bang, Giap chose Dong Ke, smaller but more strategic. "Strike Dong Ke and Cao Bang will fall by itself," he said. It worked. The French suffered heavy losses, and Vietnam gained its first strategic corridor to the outside world. From this moment, the People's Army was no longer on the defensive. The name Võ Nguyên Giáp began to echo beyond Vietnam's borders. Determined to regain control, the French occupied Hoa Binh, a key position in northern Vietnam. Giap countered with a daring campaign that blended guerrilla tactics with organized assaults. The terrain was brutal, the logistics fragile, but the will of his soldiers remained unbroken. After months of fighting, over 20,000 French and Allied troops were neutralized. The campaign proved that victory depended not on firepower, but on endurance and determination. As one French officer later admitted, "At Hoa Binh, we didn't lose to their weapons, we lost to their will." In late 1952, Giap led the Northwest Campaign to expand liberated zones and link Vietnam's northern base to Laos. The operation combined military precision with long-term vision, fighting not just to seize ground, but to shape the map. The People's Army liberated vast territories, broke French defensive lines, and solidified its strategic foothold. President Ho Chi Minh remarked, "This time, not yet perfect, but better than all before." It was a quiet acknowledgement of a maturing commander and a maturing army. In 1953, Giap led the first joint campaign with the Pathet Lao forces. The offensive liberated hundreds of thousands of Laotian civilians and extended the revolutionary base across the border. The campaign marked not only a military triumph, but a symbol of solidarity. Vietnam's struggle was no longer confined by borders. It had become part of a larger movement for freedom in Southeast Asia. A French historian later wrote, "By 1953, Giap was no longer merely Vietnam's general. He was the strategist of a revolution that transcended nations." By 1953, Võ Nguyên Giáp had become more than a battlefield commander. He was a strategist of patience and precision, a leader who knew when to strike, when to wait, and when to trust time itself. Each campaign brought Vietnam closer to independence, forging unity from hardship and victory from endurance. And on the horizon, destiny awaited. In a remote valley called Dien Bien Phu. By 1953, the First Indochina War had dragged on for 8 exhausting years. France, drained of morale and money, sought a decisive victory to reclaim its prestige. General Henri Navarre conceived a bold plan to establish an impregnable fortress at Dien Bien Phu, deep in the mountainous jungles of northwest Vietnam. The goal, to cut Viet Minh supply lines to Laos, lure General Võ Nguyên Giap's main forces into open battle, and crush them with superior firepower. On November 20, 1953, Operation Castor began. More than 10,000 paratroopers landed in the Muang Than Valley. Within weeks, they built a vast fortified camp of 49 positions, named after French women: Beatrice, Gabrielle, Anne-Marie, Dominique, Eliane. Confidence filled French ranks. "Let the Viet Minh come," they boasted. "We will annihilate them here." But in the valley they thought was a trap for others. They had built their own tomb. From his jungle headquarters, General Giap observed quietly. He knew that attacking head-on would mean certain defeat. Instead, he redefined the battlefield. His order: fight firmly, advance surely, Jan Chak, Tien Chak, tens of thousands of soldiers and laborers did the impossible. They dragged heavy artillery through mountain trails, dug more than 250 kilometers of trenches, and installed their guns high above the French positions, hidden among dense foliage. At the last moment, Giap made a historic decision. He called off the initial assault, choosing instead a slow siege, strangling the fortress day by day. It was a gamble of patience, and it changed history. On March 13, 1954, thunder filled the valley. Viet Minh artillery opened fire on Beatrice, reducing it to rubble within hours. Colonel Piroth, the French artillery commander, shocked by the overwhelming firepower, took his own life that night. Days later, Gabriel fell. General de Castres radioed Hanoi. "We are surrounded. They are everywhere, above us, below us, in the dark." By late March, the valley was completely encircled. French planes struggled to drop supplies. Most were captured by Viet Minh. Tanks sank in the mud. Rations ran out. Yet the Vietnamese troops grew stronger each day, knowing time was their greatest weapon. April brought endless rain. Each day, Viet Minh trenches crept closer, a tightening web of earth and steel. Anne-Marie, Dominique, then Eliane, became infernos. From his bunker, de Castres received the desperate order, "Hold to the last man." But his men were already broken. On May 1st, Giap launched the final assault. Artillery roared through the night. At dawn on May 7, 1954, silence fell. Through drifting smoke, the red flag with a golden star rose over Eliane too. That afternoon, de Castres surrendered unconditionally. More than 14,000 French troops were captured. His last message to Paris read simply, "La position est tombée." The position has fallen. In Hanoi, crowds poured into the streets. In Paris, silence reigned in Parliament. 80 years of colonial rule had ended in just 56 days. For Vietnam, Dien Bien Phu was not merely a military triumph, it was a declaration of destiny. For the world, it marked the death of old colonialism and inspired independence movements across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Western newspapers hailed Giap as the Red Napoleon and the victor of the impossible. Time magazine quoted his defining words, "We fight to win. We strike only when victory is certain." From a small valley in Indochina, the echoes of Dien Bien Phu reached every continent. It changed not just military strategy, but the world's understanding of courage, endurance, and conviction. The victory led directly to the Geneva Accords of 1954, ending the war and recognizing the independence of northern Vietnam. Võ Nguyên Giáp became a symbol of people's warfare, his tactics studied in military academies from Moscow to West Point. And yet he remained humble. When asked about victory, he simply said, "No victory comes without a price, but some prices must be paid for freedom." After Dien Bien Phu, Vietnam entered a fragile peace. The Geneva Accords of 1954 divided the country at the 17th parallel, north and south. In the north, General Võ Nguyên Giáp took on a new mission, to rebuild and modernize the army, not for conquest, but for unity. He reorganized the People's Army, built military academies, and trained new officers while emphasizing one enduring belief: the army belongs to the people, fights for the people, and wins with the people. As the United States replaced France in the South, Giap foresaw that another war was inevitable. By 1959, he helped the Politburo make the fateful decision. Armed struggle would resume. That same year, under Giap's directive, engineers and soldiers began carving a secret road through the Truong Son Mountains. It would become the Ho Chi Minh Trail, 16,000 kilometers of paths and pipelines stretching across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. To Giap, it was more than a road. It was the artery of a nation, carrying food, weapons, and hope. Tens of thousands of men and women labored in silence, building what no one thought possible. Without the Truong Son Trail, Giap said, there would be no liberation of the South. In 1965, the United States entered Vietnam. 500,000 American troops, thousands of aircraft, and overwhelming firepower descended upon a small, war-torn land. The world called it a war between the elephant and the ant. But Giap understood a different kind of strength, the patience of a people fighting for survival. He wove together guerrilla warfare and large-scale offensives, turning every jungle and village into a battlefield. Major battles at Bao Bang, Dong Zhuai, and Dao Tieng showed the growing power of the Liberation Army. American commander William Westmoreland admitted, "We faced a man who understood the power of time better than any general I ever met." By 1968, Giap's forces launched the Tet Offensive, a lightning strike that stunned the world. Although costly, it shattered the illusion of American victory. The war's moral balance had shifted. From Paris to Washington, millions marched with one cry, "Stop the war in Vietnam!" December 1972 brought the Linebacker II campaign, the so-called Christmas bombing. B-52s rained destruction on Hanoi and Haiphong. Giap personally oversaw air defense, declaring, "The B-52s are not invincible. We will bring them down." In 12 nights of fire, 81 American aircraft were destroyed, including 34 B-52s. The world was stunned. Within weeks, the U.S. returned to the negotiating table. It was a triumph not of technology, but of will, proof of Giap's belief. War is not only fought with steel, but with spirit. After the 1973 Paris Peace Accords, U.S. troops withdrew. Giap and the Politburo anticipated that 1975 would bring the decisive moment. The plan began with the Buon Ma Thuot offensive, breaking the enemy's western defense. When the opportunity appeared, Giap issued his now legendary order. Speed, audacity, victory, liberate the South as fast as possible. It became the command that launched the Ho Chi Minh Campaign, the final offensive. In just 55 days, 5 Army Corps stormed southward. On April 30, 1975, Saigon fell. Vietnam was reunified. Giap, the general of Dien Bien Phu, had lived to see his people free once more. He said quietly, "The victory belongs to the people. I am only a soldier among them." From 1955 to 1975, General Giap transformed not just a nation, but the very nature of modern warfare. His strategies are studied in Moscow, Beijing, Paris, and West Point alike. He was called the man who redefined modern warfare. Yet at heart he remained humble. "The higher one stands," he said, "the smaller one must feel before the people." From Dien Bien to Saigon, from resistance to peace, Giap's life was the arc of a century, a testament that no force is greater than the will of a people to be free. After reunification, General Võ Nguyên Giáp sought no personal glory. He returned to a life of simplicity, the same uniform, the same humble smile. As Minister of Defense and later Deputy Prime Minister for Science and Education, he believed that a nation's strength lies in the liberation of its intellect. In the 1980s, as the world entered the nuclear and technological age, he urged Vietnam to invest in education and science. He told young researchers, "The greatest victory is to overcome ignorance." For him, peace was not the end of struggle. It was the beginning of a new one, to build and to learn. Võ Nguyên Giap's name transcended borders. From Asia to Africa, from Latin America to Europe, he became a symbol of national liberation and human dignity. Fidel Castro called him the hero among heroes. In South Africa, Nelson Mandela said, "We studied General Giap to learn that no prison can confine the desire for freedom." In France, Le Monde wrote, He was the man who made the 20th century redefine victory. At West Point, his campaigns are studied as models of asymmetric strategy. And in London, Reussy honored him as a strategist for humanity. He was admired not just for winning wars, but for envisioning a world beyond them. I was a teacher before I was a soldier, and perhaps I always will be, he once said. Indeed, even in victory he remained a teacher, calm, reflective, and humble. When asked by a young officer for the secret of victory, Giap replied, "There is no secret, only faith in your people." That was the essence of his philosophy. The people were the source of all power. In his final decades, Giap lived quietly on Hoangdiu Street in Hanoi. Visitors came from all walks of life, students, veterans, foreign scholars, to meet not just a general, but a living piece of history. He would shake their hands gently and say, "Peace is the most precious victory." When he passed away in October 2013, at the age of 103, the entire nation fell silent. From Hanoi to his hometown of Quang Binh, hundreds of thousands lined the streets to say farewell. No military parades, no fanfare, only the tears of a grateful people. As his coffin crossed the Nha Le River, the sea grew still. Locals said, even the waves stopped to salute the general. Today, the world remembers Võ Nguyên Giáp not merely as a military genius, but as a man who proved that victory could be achieved with compassion and intellect. He once wrote, "I never thought of myself as great, only fortunate to belong to a great people." His legacy lives on, in the heartbeat of Vietnam, in every student's dream, in every soldier's oath. And perhaps, somewhere among the misty peaks of the Truong Son Mountains, his voice still echoes softly. The nation is the people, and the people are the nation. And that's the end of today's video. If you found it helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Stories and Documents channel. And turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any similar content in the future. Goodbye, and see you next time.